October 1983, a Japanese corporation called Casio decided to launch its first gaming console called the Casio PV-1000. This third generation console was only released in Japan and had a lifespan of less than 1 year due to low sales. The PV-2000 was released shortly after the PV-1000, but didn't survive in the market that long. Now, over 10 years later, Casio decided to try again with the console gaming market and see if they had better luck this time and learn from their mistakes. On October 15, 1995, the Casio Loopy was released exclusively in Japan for the ladies. I'm being serious. This is the only game consoles I know of that's specifically targeted towards females. But why exactly? Well, there's no exact answer since it was only released in Japan and there is very limited information that I could find online. One possible answer is that a peer-to-Kyoto machine were starting to emerge in Japan in 1995, the same year that Casio Loopy got released. The main function of a Casio Loopy is to have the ability to print screenshots of video games as stickers, an interesting concept at the time. Part of the attempt to get the Casio Loopy units sold to women was to have the console come in colors such as lavender, pink, and purple. The box was also covered in cartoon hearts. The games also featured a lot of female main characters that involved dress up. Another interesting thing is that the game cartridges are very similar to the console's Super Famicom. Now let's look at the pros and cons of this device. The console is user-friendly to hook up. It only uses standard AV outputs so that it doesn't need any kind of special equipment to be hooked up. The Loopy features a built-in thermal color printer which could be used to create stickers from game screenshots, and also features an internal cutting tool to separate the pictures. The console did not include an internal camera for taking pictures through the use of its peripherals. However, the Loopy is able to take images from other devices such as VCRs and DVD players to print as stickers. Now, this game does have a lot of cons. The most important one is the lack of games that have been produced on this device. In the span of 1 year, only 10 games were released, and the majority of the games involve mostly dress up, which can get really repetitive after only playing for a few hours. Collecting these games is also a pain. They are hard to find and can be super expensive to buy. I would just recommend playing the ROM versions of these games on the internet. Another major problem with the console is that there's only one controller port, so there's no way of playing any games that involve multiplayer. Here are the console hardware specs. This is what they are with the limited information that I have. Here's the games library list categorized in no particular order. The most popular game on this list is Anime Land, a standard dress-up game with very little gameplay. If this is supposed to be your best game on your console, you know you're in trouble. While the game console is marketed strictly towards a female audience, this is definitely not the reason why it failed. The lack of a decent game library may turn them away. Hell, even the Virtual Boy had a bigger game library, and that console was a piece of crap. Honestly, the game console could have lasted longer and probably make a good profit if it had a bigger game library, allowed multiplayer, and a better release date. Let me explain. In the months predating the Loopy's release, Atlas and Sega released the first peer-to-Kyoto machine, Print Club, a photo booth which allowed the application of stickers and backgrounds to photos. However, the machines didn't really take off with the female market until pop star group SMAP took several pictures of their television show, SMAP X SMAP, in 1996. The Loopy's release date sets it apart from the peer-to-Kyoto craze, which effectively started several months after its release. Now, if the Loopy's release date was in 1996 instead of 1995, that could possibly make a difference, but it's honestly too hard to tell. In the end, software developers made only 10 games in a year's time frame, but the console lived on for a couple more years until 1998. Then, it pulled the plug. That was the last game console that Casio decided to ever release. The company itself is still increasing in revenue with selling calculators, phones, musical instruments, watches, and more. They just decided to stay away from game consoles. Sounds familiar? With giants like Sony and Nintendo in Japan, there probably won't be a Casio console anytime soon. But who knows? Anything could happen at this point. Thanks for watching.